Got milk? Great taste, less filling. Think small, get a Mac. Have a Coke and a smile, catch the wave. Real beauty, quality never goes out of style. A diamond is forever. When you hear one of these slogans, the advertising executives who came up with them want you to respond instantaneously and with a highly specific emotion. The happiest place on earth? Joy. The man your man could smell like? Desire. Quality never goes out of style. Elegant chic. Where's the beef? A chuckle. The ad makers don't want you to think a lot about your responses. Your feelings should simply overtake you, like the feelings of a Pavlovian dog at the dinging of a bell, or in this case, the jingling of a slogan. Advertisers want a conditioned response that's quick and consistent. They hope to tap into your subconscious. Why? Well, so that the next time you plan a vacation or buy shampoo or reach for a beer, their slogan will make you think of their product. Now, marketers and corporate kingpins alike are, in the frank terminology of classic economics, self-interested. They aren't trying to get you to feel happiness or compassion for your own benefit or for the benefit of humanity. They're trying to get you to feel that you just can't live another moment without whatever they're selling. Aristotle called the appeal a writer makes to an audience's emotions pathos. Now, where ethos is a writer's word as his bond and logos is a writer's process of reasoning, pathos is the writer's heart, the empathy that he has for his subject. Pathos is Aristotle's third and final artistic proof. And Aristotle would have concluded that because ad makers and copywriters are paid to take money out of your wallet, then the ways in which they try to excite your emotions are unethical. In essence, they are breaking their bond with their audience, both in terms of their words and in terms of their reasoning. Sometimes the writer ties pathos to logos in order to make the logic of an argument more attractive. Other times, pathos is a key to strengthening a writer's ethos or credibility. And emotional connections can build trust between an author and a reader. Now, even though pathos is a potent and highly effective rhetorical appeal, I'd also like to say it's the hardest artistic proof for any essay writer to work with. So why would that be so? Because it's tough to use emotional appeals well. Your readers have been told their whole lives that their personal feelings are the governing authority of their wants, needs, and opinions. They've been sold the idea that they are what they feel. And that's because advertisers, as well as TV and film producers, video game designers, social media moguls, bombard people all the time with false emotional appeals. They want to titillate, fascinate, shock, and surprise their audiences, not to get their audiences to think more deeply about complex topics. In much of the popular media, there's little attempt to teach an audience how to experience empathy for others, or to transform that empathy into a wider understanding of what it means to be human. But it's not just ad execs or Hollywood producers who tug at our heartstrings to get at our purse strings. Politicians, educators, lawyers, doctors, publishers, even certain kinds of writers are also guilty of trying to manipulate their audiences by stirring up gut-level emotions. Any passion peddler is trying to sell something. And if the motive for engaging the emotions of an audience is to sell, whether it's to sell toothpaste, votes, or a college degree, then strictly speaking, that pathos may be considered false. In the classical Aristotelian view, that means it's an unethical appeal to emotion. You might think it should be easy to draw an emotion to persuade someone to feel a specific way about a certain topic, particularly within your essays. But eliciting a brief or naive emotional response is not the same as wielding pathos, wielding it with skill and care. And it might be all the harder to convince your audience through authentic appeals to emotion, because many potential readers are already so desensitized to true pathos. It takes work for an essayist to turn the schmaltzy, sensationalized cliches of love, humor, anger, pain, desire, or happiness into poignant emotions. For one thing, an essayist has to make a conscious attempt to get readers to re-experience, through words, an event, action, or idea, as the writer himself first experienced it. And then for another thing, an essayist has to convince his readers that his own feelings are honest, and that he isn't just being manipulative. Even further, an essayist has to decide what kind of pathos will make his point, whether it's an appeal to the reader's senses, or to a shared vision of the future, or to a kind of compassion that leads to fellow feeling. Okay, so let me give you a few examples to help you distinguish between false and true appeals to your reader's emotions. I'm going to start with an advertisement that I included in my own writing textbook called Advancing Rhetoric. This ad is for a product called Nescafé Iced Java, which consists of a coffee-based syrup that was to be mixed with milk and ice to make iced coffee. The first Nescafé products were for hot beverages made from powdered coffee. When Nescafé was first introduced back in 1938, the Swiss corporation Nestlé combined its own name with the Italian word café in the hopes of giving its product the feel of a European drink. It was an instant success, so to speak, particularly among American housewives after World War II. Today, Nescafé is second only to Coca-Cola in worldwide brand recognition. The ad campaign for Iced Java began a few decades later, in 1997, when Nescafé was long since a household word, and it ran for several years in a number of American magazines. One particular ad in this campaign originally appeared in Jane magazine. It starts with the phrase, "Ice Java Cool." Although the message seems simple at first, it actually creates an immediate tension. Let me explain why. Java, of course, is a word that's associated with heat, with a hot cup of coffee. But Java is also an island in Indonesia with a tropical climate. So the island's name is a kind of metaphor. A rich, robust cup of coffee must come from a rich, robust place. In addition, at least in the United States, the word Java suggests that it's a more alluring drink than just plain old coffee. Why? Well, because it comes from the East Indies, a place that Americans sometimes exoticize as being alluring or mysterious. Yet on the other side of all of this Java heat is the idea of icy cold. And the coolness of the slogan, Ice Java Cool, is underscored by the colors and fonts within this ad. The words appear in dark cobalt blue against a light blue background, and the font is curvy, sans serif. So the color and the look of the letters convey a sense of cool, meaning chilly in terms of temperature, but also, of course, meaning smart and stylish. The photos that accompany the advertising copy match the emotional tension created in the words Ice Java Cool. These photos present a sequence of images. They're a story without words. And the story moves frame by frame, like the page out of a graphic novel. All told, there are 4 photos in this particular ad. In the first, a viewer gets a panoramic shot of 2 men and 2 women hanging out on an urban rooftop watching some old-time movie that's playing on a reel-to-reel projector. The color palette is directly linked to the subject matter. These blues are reminiscent of the flicker of film on a silver screen. They are also the colors of an evening sky. The blues also seem to emanate from the paper lanterns strung above the group, as well as from the soft city lights that surround them. While watching the movie, 3 of the people are seated on a couch. One other man is standing up drinking from a glass. His shiny bald head and white shirt and the triangle bend of his elbow, holding the drink to his mouth, draw the eye to the center of this image. Then the next frame is a close-up, linking this new scene to what the bald-headed man has in his glass. Now viewers get to see the drink itself, which is cool, it's full of ice, and yet also warm. It's the color of milky coffee. Here, then, is the moment when the audience finds out exactly what's for sale. Nescafé Iced Java. The blue background on the label links the Nescafé bottle to the rest of the images. But this is the only frame that's not under some kind of an indigo scrim. Instead, the creamy tan of the iced coffee is the brightest thing on the whole page. It's also the largest of the photos, demonstrating its importance in the story. After showing off the product, the next frame is the visual story cuts back to the movie watchers. And this image shows some of the people up close, all smiling and having fun while drinking their iced javas. Now, though, it's a woman who's holding the glass. It's this final picture that adds a new twist to the story. The woman is no longer watching the film, but instead is seated cross-legged on the ledge of the roof, which is the only thing keeping her from falling to the street below. She holds her drink in one hand and leans in to talk to the same bald-headed man who was enjoying his own iced java earlier. The woman is African American and the man is white. In this final frame, it's the woman who is the one drinking the iced java, and she strikes us as a bit dangerous and exotic, sitting on the ledge of the roof. She's passionate, yet poised. So the pretty woman and the cool drink become merged as one in the mind of the consumer. And this final frame of the advertisement ends with the ad copy. You're just a squeeze away. Suddenly, cool is anywhere you want to be. Now, since this ad appeared in Jane magazine, its target audience would have been women between the ages of 18 and 35, ones who weren't into the typical fashion mags like Cosmo or Vanity Fair. Its founder, Jane Pratt, wanted Jane to be political in some of its content and to explore women's sexuality openly. The magazine tried to be both progressive and smart. So the readers of Jane might well have identified with a group of diverse, adventurous friends watching a movie on a rooftop. Such readers might also have wanted to see themselves as both hot and cool, sexy, but also self-possessed. And the ad makers at Nestle understood that they had to remake their earlier World War II era image if their product was going to appeal to this audience. The rebranding worked. Nescafé moved into the 20 and 30-something market with a new range of products using emotional appeals that targeted a younger and more diverse demographic. And yet, despite this success, the iced java ad's emotional appeals are sophistic rather than respectable. They are unethical rather than ethical. So why would I say that? Well, for one, the ad plays on consumer desire to be cool in a figurative way. The jingle, the imagery, and the ad copy all suggest that if you drink iced java, you'll be as young, good-looking, exciting, and carefree as these four friends on the rooftop. Also, the advertisers' motives are self-interested. The Nescafé Corporation wants to grow its demographic audience because the company wants to make money, and lots of it. They're probably not at all that interested in whether drinking iced java will actually make someone more stylish or sexy. If the brand makes the consumer feel this way, then that's enough. And such emotional manipulation is an example of what Aristotle would have called false pathos. It's not just advertisers, of course, who misuse pathos. Political speechwriters and campaign managers are notorious for misusing pathos in much the same way. And it matters little whether certain claims are factual or not. The point is to get a soundbite that will play well with voters and hopefully trend on social media. We don't recall famous political soundbites for their emotional complexity. Vote yourself a farm. I like Ike. Not just peanuts. Compassionate conservatism. Yes, we can. Some of us remember these slogans because they're zingers. They pack an emotional punch. But the punch is short-lived. So as an essay writer, if you hope to move your audience, to get them to see something in a new way, to change or expand their minds, then your appeals to emotion must be genuine and complex. The point of true pathos is to build emotion slowly, carefully recreating an experience to help the reader relive what the writer sees, does, and thinks. It's the essay writer's job to arrive at a new understanding about the world for both herself and for her reader. Put another way, pathos shouldn't be about persuading others to want something. That's the false pathos of advertising and political campaigns. Instead, the highest purpose of engaging pathos should be to influence readers to feel something significant. And so when turning to emotional appeals, the essay writer's motives need to be ethical. In Aristotle's treatise on persuasive writing, called The Rhetoric, he talks about the proof of pathos in 3 distinct ways. He explains, "The emotions are all those feelings that so change men as to affect their judgments. Such are anger, pity, fear, and the like, with their opposites. We must arrange what we have to say about each of them under 3 heads. Take, for instance, the emotion of anger. Here we must discover 1, what the state of mind of angry people is, 2, who the people are with whom they usually get angry, and 3, on what grounds they get angry with them. It is not enough to know 1 or even 2 of these points. Unless we know all 3, we shall be unable to arouse anger in anyone." So in other words, Aristotle wants speakers and writers to understand the nature of the emotion they hope to inspire, and then to consider how this feeling is aroused in their audience. Aristotle wants us to decide upon the reasons, motivations, or causes that elicit this kind of emotion. Okay, so in this view, true pathos isn't reactionary or transitory. It isn't a mean to rev up our blood pressure or to get us to hand over our credit cards. Instead, by teaching a reader how to empathize, true pathos is an artistic appeal with the profound power to change people's sense of themselves and their sense of others. This means that as writers, we need to think carefully about how to evoke emotional responses. Even more importantly, we have to consider how our readers might put these emotions to use after they've closed the magazine or turned off the computer or finished our podcast. So let's take a look at 2 essays that include many instances of true pathos that's employed in the name of creating empathy. My 2 examples use raw, honest, and moving language about racial, sexual, and class-based oppressions. They come from Maxine Hong Kingston's essay, No Name Woman, and Barack Obama's first inaugural address. In No Name Woman, Kingston retells a story she once heard about a nameless ant. Nameless because back in China, the ant got pregnant out of wedlock and threw herself and her baby into a well, drowning them both. Although this woman was the only sister of Kingston's father, the whole family now says that her father has only brothers. The memory of this ant has been erased. As Kingston puts it, it's as if she had never been born. At the climax of her essay, Kingston reiterates the story of the baby's birth, as if she herself were a witness to it. She writes, "Laboring, this woman who had carried her child as a foreign growth that sickened her every day, expelled it at last. She reached down to touch the hot, wet moving mass, surely smaller than anything human, and could feel that it was human after all, fingers, toes, nails, nose. She pulled it up to her belly, and it lay curled there, butt in the air, feet precisely tucked one under the other. She opened her loose shirt and buttoned the child inside. After resting, it squirmed and thrashed, and there it made little snuffling noises. The woman clenched her teeth at its preciousness. Full of milk, the little ghost slept. When it awoke, the woman hardened her breasts against the milk that crying loosens, and toward morning, she picked up the baby and walked to the well. In the 20 years since I heard this story, I have not asked for details nor said my aunt's name. I do not know it." In this passage, Kingston isn't only combining her imagination with the few facts she knows in order to get at a larger sense of the truth. She's also being highly precise and vivid in her sense-based details and imagery. At first, she calls the baby a foreign growth that sickens the mother. And yet, as soon as the baby is born and brought up to the mother's stomach, it becomes recognizable as human, with fingers, toes, nails, nose. Such precision allows a reader to re-see and rehear this baby, not as a generic infant, but as this particular baby. In this way, then, this anonymous dead child or ghost is brought back to life in Kingston's tactile descriptions of its body. And yet, in the baby's beginning is its end, and the mother's clenched teeth symbolize the impossibility of being able to protect and to keep this precious baby. After spending just one night together, the mother picks up her child and walks them both to their deaths. Kingston refuses to be generic in her writing, refuses to call the baby beautiful or miraculous, as all children are. She also insists that an untold story about an unnamed woman can still be vivid and valid, and this is what enables Kingston to engage authentic pathos. This tender moment is both hard and horrific, and the way in which Kingston humanizes her lost aunt and baby cousin simultaneously erases both of them. Such is the intricacy of true pathos, which is neither easy nor simplistic. So, one way you use pathos effectively is to resist generalizations. The more detailed, descriptive, and specific you are in your essays, and the more you engage your reader's full senses, the more rich and resonant will be your pathos. If you find yourself saying that something always happens or never happens, or if you lump situations or people together under generic terms or expected descriptions, stop and ask yourself, what about this situation or person is unlike any other situation across history? How can I get my reader to re-see and to re-feel this singular, unique experience? Now, another way for you to eschew false pathos is to avoid cliches. A cliché, of course, is an expression or concept that's so overused that it no longer has any real meaning. It's been drained of whatever emotion it once contained. People have heard these phrases or ideas so often that, like lampposts and telephone wires, they're practically invisible, even when in full view. At the sentence level, a cliché might be a turn of phrase. On the ropes, don't rock the boat, it's now or never, good for nothing, over the hill, out on a limb. It might also, though, be an attempt to show a person in the throes of strong emotion, such as pain or fear or love or need. A pool of blood, a flood of tears, a tear trickled down her face. Tears gushed out of the corners of her eyes. His heart beat like a drum. These are the ways that untold numbers of writers have tried to convey powerful feelings, and as a result, we actually feel almost nothing at all when we hear them. To use a cliché, the phrase goes in one ear and out the other. Clichés fail to loop the heart or to curl the mind. They fail to get us to re-see or to re-feel much of anything at all. A political speech is a notorious place to find such clichés, both at the sentence level and at the level of idea. How many times have you heard a politician talk about the challenges we face and society's ills, or how the world has changed, or that the nation has a strong spirit? A politician feels obligated to invoke at least some of these clichés because they are a common language. It's the repetition of such phrases that makes a cliché into a cliché. And yet, the best political speeches take the common language of the cliché and alter, extend, and amend our expectations. In doing so, a cliché may be renovated into a fresh and new idea. Now, we don't usually think of a presidential address as an essay, but such a speech is yet another kind of true story well told. A presidential address has a first-person speaker whose intention is to persuade his or her audience. And if the president takes the common language of his citizens' clichés and then builds upon them in a meaningful way, then the speaker is using true pathos to reinforce his credibility. Barack Obama, in his first inaugural address in 2009, was credited by many as doing just that. He said, "In reaffirming the greatness of our nation, we understand that greatness is never a given. It must be earned. Our journey has never been one of shortcuts or settling for less. It has not been the path for the faint-hearted, for those who prefer leisure over work, or seek only the pleasures of riches and fame. Rather, it has been the risk-takers, the doers, the makers of things, some celebrated, but more often men and women obscure in their labor, who have carried us up the long, rugged path toward prosperity and freedom. For us, they packed up their few worldly possessions and traveled across oceans in search of a new life. For us, they toiled in sweatshops and settled the West, endured the lash of the whip, and plowed the hard earth. For us, they fought and died in places like Concord and Gettysburg, Normandy and Quezon. Time and again, these men and women struggled and sacrificed and worked till their hands were raw, so that we might live a better life. They saw America as bigger than the sum of our individual ambitions, greater than all the differences of birth or wealth or faction. One rhetorical element that is immediately apparent is the cadence of Obama's speech. Such alliterative and rhythmic elements aren't necessarily about creating pathos, but they do evoke an emotional response. Listening to Obama's sentences just feels good. He's particularly good at parallel constructions, which create a kind of refrain, like returning to the chorus of a pop song. For instance, he repeats, "for us," and "the time has come." This musicality, especially when read out loud, fosters a sense that these ideas are apt and compelling, that these ideas go together like a hand in a glove, like coffee and cream. Even more importantly, Obama takes cliches and turns them into something else that engages real feeling. His cliched expressions are obvious: riches and fame, prosperity and freedom, they fought and died, they struggled and sacrificed. Yet Obama's piece doesn't just begin and end with cliches. Instead, like Maxine Hong Kingston, he invokes specific images to excite our senses. We see those who packed up their few worldly possessions and traveled across oceans. We see others who toiled in sweatshops and settled the West, who endured the lash of the whip, and who plowed the hard earth. By telling these brief stories of the men and women who immigrated from the old world to the new, who were brought as slaves, who were homesteaders and ranchers, or who worked in squalid and dangerous factories, Obama engenders our present-day nation and its citizens, particularly when he arrives at his final image of these people, working till their hands were raw, so that we might live a better life. We come away with a distinct picture in our mind's eye of these ancestors and of our collective debt to them. And this final image of the individual becoming part of a larger group, and of the past becoming the present, allows Obama to land on his larger idea, which isn't a cliché at all. His larger idea is that America is bigger than the sum of our individual ambitions, and greater than all the differences of birth or wealth or faction. Okay, with Obama's and Kingston's essays in mind, let me leave you with two final points about engaging pathos in your own essays. First, while pathos is a tool for writing essays, it's not the end-all be-all. For to be effective, pathos must support your reasoning and argumentation, as well as your credibility. In other words, pathos needs to support your logos and your ethos. What I mean is this: if you don't think well, you can't make someone empathize very well. And if you can't be trusted, no one is going to care whether you're trying to get her to feel. Now, even though pathos shouldn't be the main focus of your writing, it's still important to remember the power of pathos, especially if you ask your reader to come inside your own perspective and to experience the world as you do. For that is how true empathy works. And within essays, creating empathy is actually more important than whatever subject you're writing about. As a young senator from Illinois, Barack Obama himself once said, "Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world." As essay writers, we benefit from cultivating our sense of empathy. When we look out on the world through someone else's eyes, we too are profoundly and permanently changed.